Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be like slowing things down, getting all reflective and philosophical.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and we've got this really unique source material for this one. It's a collection of like thoughts and stories from someone who is 95 years young.
Wow.
I now talk about a lifetime of experiences.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to be able to tap into that kind of wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. Someone who has seen almost a century of change.
I know, it's incredible. And you know what really stood out to me? They talked about how fame and fortune are basically like desert mirages. They seem really appealing from far away,
Right.
but in the end, they're not really what brings you lasting satisfaction.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what actually does matter when you're looking back on life after all that time.
And that seems to be the central question that they're grappling with in this. And their answer seems to be about like slowing down and appreciating all those small everyday moments.
It's definitely a contrast to that whole, go, go, go mentality so many of us are caught up in.
For sure. So they're advocating for slowing down. But what's really fascinating is the WHY behind it. It's not just about like taking a break or anything. They actually compare life to a garden.
Okay.
They say that you can only truly appreciate its beauty when you actually stop rushing and notice the details.
That's a great point. It's like if you were just like rushing through a garden without stopping to actually like see the flowers or smell anything, you'd miss out on everything.
Totally. And I think that's where the idea of mindfulness comes in. They're not just saying relax, they're saying engage with life more deeply, even in the mundane stuff.
It's true. Like that idea we talk about sometimes with mindful eating,
Right.
where you really savor each bite instead of just like shoveling it all down, or actually like deeply listening to a friend when they're talking to you instead of, half paying attention while scrolling through your phone.
Right. It's like being all in, even for those small moments.
Mhm.
And they have this amazing story about this. They talk about a time when they were a young police officer chasing down a suspect
Oh, wow.
on foot through the city streets.
Oh, I bet that was intense.
But years later, what they remember most vividly isn't like actually catching the bad guy. It's the way the sunlight hit the buildings during the chase and like the smell of freshly baked bread coming from this bakery they ran past.
Wow.
Those small moments of beauty amidst all the chaos, those are what stuck with them.
Yeah, I could see that. And it shows how slowing down isn't about like, being passive or anything. It's
Yeah.
about being completely present, even when things are totally hectic.
Exactly. So we're starting to get a sense of their philosophy. Slow down, be present, engage with all the little details. But they don't stop there. They also say something that I think a lot of us struggle with. Don't wait until it's too late to say, I love you or I'm sorry.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like they're encouraging us to be more deliberate about expressing our feelings.
Right. And they share this really poignant story about a close friend that they lost touch with.
Mhm.
For years, they meant to reach out to apologize for this silly argument they had, but they kept putting it off, and then suddenly their friend passed away. It became this huge regret for them, carrying the weight of all those unspoken words.
It's a reminder that relationships are precious. And sometimes we take for granted the time we have.
It makes you think about those little grudges you might be holding on to, or those kind words you've been meaning to say but haven't gotten around to.
It's true. It's like a call to action to be more present in our relationships and really express our feelings.
And speaking of expressing feelings, they also talk a lot about forgiveness.
Okay.
Do you remember that line they use? Carrying resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer.
Oh, yeah. That one was intense. It really captures how self-destructive holding on to anger can be.
Totally. And what I found interesting is that they specifically emphasize self-forgiveness, too.
Interesting.
There's this whole section where they talk about beating themselves up over past mistakes.
I think we all do that.
Right. They were a boxer in their younger years.
Oh, well.
And they said they were actually much kinder to their opponents in the ring than they were to themselves afterward.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's easy to be our own worst critics.
And they argue that learning to forgive yourself is just as important as forgiving others.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of that inner critic and recognizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes.
For sure.
They even say we're all just works in progress and every scar tells a story.
I love that. It's such a beautiful way to reframe how we see our imperfections.
So we've got slowing down, expressing love, forgiving ourselves and others. It's starting to sound like a recipe for a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
It really does.
Yeah.
But they also acknowledge that life isn't always easy, that we all face challenges and setbacks.
Yeah.
And that's where they bring in this idea of growth.
Right, but it's not the typical kind of growth we always hear about, like climbing the career ladder or achieving some big external marker of success. they have a different perspective on what growth really means.
And that's where things get really interesting.
So they're really into this idea of growth, but it's not about like that hustle culture thing we hear all the time.
Yeah.
They actually say growth isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about going deeper. What do you think they mean by that?
That's interesting. It seems like maybe they're talking about shifting our focus from like outward achievements to more of an internal development.
Yeah.
There's one analogy where they compare life to a tree. Like you can have a tree that grows really tall and wide,
Right.
but if the roots aren't deep enough, it's going to be super vulnerable when a storm hits.
I like that. So it's more about strengthening that inner foundation instead of just expanding outward. But how do you actually go deeper in life? What would that look like?
Well, they talk about a few different ways. One is through self-reflection. They mention keeping journals for most of their life, using writing as a way to process their experiences and emotions.
Oh, wow.
And they even say something like, the unexamined life isn't worth living.
It's like that quote takes on a whole new meaning coming from someone who's 95. It's like they're saying that continuous self-discovery is the key to a good life.
Totally. Another way they talk about going deeper is through relationships. They seem to believe that real growth happens when you're connecting with others. Through those deep conversations where you can be vulnerable and learn from each other.
They tell a story about this time when they were struggling with a career decision.
Oh.
They were tempted to take this high-paying job that sounded amazing on paper.
I bet.
But deep down, it just didn't feel right.
What did they do?
Well, instead of just going with it, they talked to a mentor, someone they really trusted. And the mentor encouraged them to look beyond the obvious benefits and consider what actually aligned with their values.
So it's about being honest with yourself and seeking advice from people you trust.
Exactly. And you know what? They actually turned down that job and went for something that wasn't as prestigious, but seemed way more fulfilling.
Wow.
And they said it was one of the best decisions they ever made.
That's a great reminder that growth isn't always straightforward or predictable. Sometimes it's about taking a detour or following your gut. Defining success on your own terms.
Right. So we're seeing this theme of like self-awareness, deep connection, and defining success in a way that's different from the norm. But how does all this tie back to slowing down?
I think it's about giving yourself the space to actually grow. When we're always rushing around, there's no time for introspection or deep conversations or even connecting with your intuition.
Yeah, they actually have this line that's something like, if you want to hear your inner voice, you have to turn down the volume of the world.
It's so true. It's about quieting all that noise so we can connect with ourselves.
Which is not easy these days.
Not at all.
We're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation. There's always pressure to be productive and on all the time.
Yeah, it's like we're addicted to speed. But this person seems to be saying that slowing down is a way of rebelling against that. It's about taking back your time and attention and using it for things that truly matter.
That reminds me of the whole intentional living thing.
Oh, yeah.
Choosing how you spend your time instead of letting it be controlled by everything else around you.
Exactly. And it's about making choices that fit your values, even if they go against what you're supposed to do.
But wouldn't a slower, more intentional life make you less productive?
That's what a lot of people think. But they actually argue that slowing down can make you more productive in a different way. It's about working smarter, not harder.
I'm curious, how does that work?
Well, they say that when you actually take time to rest, recharge, connect with yourself,
Okay.
that's when you tap into your creativity and inspiration. Those things wouldn't be accessible if you were always pushing yourself to the limit.
So it's like that saying, sometimes you need to slow down to speed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They believe that true productivity comes from being in alignment and flow. And those things only come when you make space for stillness and reflection.
It makes you wonder what we could accomplish if we weren't so focused on rushing all the time. What potential might be waiting for us if we just slowed down and were more present and intentional.
I think that's something worth exploring.
It's funny, when we talk about slowing down, it sounds like this big revolutionary idea.
I know, right?
But this person makes it sound so simple. Like maybe it's not about changing everything about your life.
Right.
It's more about shifting your perspective, making small changes that add up to a bigger difference in how you experience things.
Yeah, I agree. It's like those little things that can have a ripple effect, like choosing to walk instead of drive whenever you can.
Oh, yeah.
And not just for the exercise, but
Sure.
to actually see your surroundings. Notice things you wouldn't in a car.
Totally. Or like having dinner with your family with no phones.
Oh, yeah. Put those phones away.
Actually talk to each other.
Exactly.
They talk about this ritual they have every morning, making tea.
Oh,
but doing it really intentionally, not just like throwing a tea bag in hot water, like
all right.
actually taking the time to pick out the tea, warm up the teapot, smell the aroma before you even take a sip.
Wow.
And they say it sets the tone for their whole day.
It's a good reminder that mindfulness doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing. It can just be part of your everyday routine.
And that's what I think makes their message so relatable. It's not about going off and living like a monk.
Yeah.
It's about being more aware and intentional in the life you're already living.
Exactly. And they admit that it isn't always easy. They talk about struggling with impatience, especially when they were younger,
Oh, yeah.
always on the go, chasing the next adventure or thrill.
I can see that.
But as they got older, they realized that the best moments weren't about the destination. They were about the journey itself.
It's like saying that true happiness isn't something you achieve, it's something you cultivate along the way.
Right, and that takes effort. They talk a lot about the importance of practicing slowing down and savoring things, even when you just want to rush.
And that's where self-compassion is so important, I think. They talk about being kind to themselves,
Yeah.
recognizing that they're not perfect and that some days they'll slip back into old habits. But instead of beating themselves up about it,
Right.
they try to see it as a chance to learn and grow.
It's like they're saying it's okay to be human.
It's okay to mess up.
It's exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
Which brings us back to their final piece of advice. Never stop growing. I love that.
Me too.
It's like they're encouraging us to keep exploring and evolving and becoming more ourselves,
And it's a good reminder that growth isn't just for young people.
right?
This person was still growing at 95.
I know. It's about staying curious your whole life, being open to new experiences and challenges.
And never thinking it's too late to try something new.
Exactly. Maybe you've always wanted to learn a new language or take up painting or travel somewhere new, or maybe it's something smaller, like starting that tea ritual we talked about, taking a walk in nature, or finally having that tough conversation you've been putting off.
The important thing is that you're taking steps towards the life that feels right for you. Even small steps.
This has been such a great deep dive, so insightful and inspiring. I feel like I've learned a lot today.
Me too. It reminds us that the simplest truths are often the most powerful. Slow down, be present, connect deeply, never stop growing.
Maybe that's all it takes to live a really meaningful life.
Maybe it is.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into something new. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep living with intention.